Hello everybody, this is Refresh, and I went to a Crimson Vow pre-release a little while ago, and I'm here to walk you through my experience. As with previous pre-releases for Magic the Gathering, this is a fairly low frills affair. You get your pre-release pack. Inside is your deck box with some handsome Sorin artwork. And then once you open it up, you will get a decorative invitation to the wedding of Olivia and Edgar. On the back, a little information guide on how to build a pre-release deck. You also get a card with a code for 6 packs of Crimson Vow on Magic Arena. And you get a promo card and 6 booster packs. In this case, my promo card was the Overcharged Amalgam, which is a very strong card. And you also get a handful of these double face assistant cards so that you can play your double face cards easily. I think that Crimson Vow is an interesting idea. I wish that there was a little bit more pomp and circumstance to the experience as usual with these pre-releases. I do wish that the pre-release packs contained tokens. We had to just use whatever tokens that we found in our packs. I had no blood, for example. And that means that I just had to use whatever random dice or whatever I had to mark blood. And it would have been nicer if there was tokens to represent that. Anyway, I'll show you what I opened. This is everything I opened. As you can see, white has a much deeper pool than any of the other 4 colors. And of those colors, every color had something going for it. So there was a little bit to think about in terms of what kind of deck that I was going to build. But I was definitely going to build with white, because it just had so many cards in it, and most of the cards were decent creatures. And so in blue, I had the Overcharged Amalgam as my promo card, and that was probably its strongest element. Outside of that, I didn't feel like the color had too much going on for it, aside from maybe a Lantern Bearer and the Cobbled Lancer if it was in the right deck. And so I sort of disregarded blue pretty quickly, unless I could find a way to get the Overcharged Amalgam to be worthwhile. Black had some good removal in terms of the Bleed Dry and the Parasitic Grasp. It also had a couple decent strong cards in the Concealing Curtains and the Headless Rider. I liked both of those cards, and so it was in high consideration. Red was about even to black overall because it had some good removal cards in the Abrades and the Lacerate Flesh, and it had probably the strongest bomb of all the cards in the Olivia's Attendants, and using the fancy border style that is there for Crimson Vow. And I think both of them could have worked with white, but red synergy with white was a lot stronger because of the humans and wolves theme that red had, as opposed to black in this particular instance. And then green was, even though it had slightly less cards than the other colors, it actually also had some good synergy with white as well because of the humans theme that it had going on. And so I sort of ruled out black despite that it had some good removal, but the overall combination of cards in red and green were a little bit stronger. And I ended up going with red instead of green just because it had more consistency in the kinds of cards that it had. The Hungry Ridge rules worked together with the Ballista Watchers, which I had 2 of each, and Olivia's Attendants as a bomb is, I think, much stronger than the Hamlet Vanguard in green, which was green's bomb. It's not that interesting of a creature though, just because it's just a dude that happens to have ward. And so I ended up going with red, and I will show you the deck that I built. So this is the deck that I built. As you can see, it is just a bunch of decent creatures, decent removal. It leans just a bit more aggressive with heavy in 2s and 3s, and you have the bomb with the Olivia's Attendants at the end, as well as some flyers to try to get in through in the late game. And I used the double face cards as well to power up the existing creatures. There's enough humans that the resistance squads are actually pretty decent here, as long as the Ballista Watchers don't flip. And that is the deck. Next, I'm going to show you the games that I played with this deck. In my first match, I was up against another white-red deck, and I had a pretty good lead on them for a while, but they were able to get some lifelink gears and turn the game around. And even though I eventually was able to gain some life myself, at that point my opponent just had too many creatures for me to overcome, and I lost the first game. In the second game, I just flooded out. Like, we were doing alright, and then I just drew only lands, and you lose magic when that happens. And so the first match went to my opponent, and my white-red deck went on to the next player, who was also playing a white-red deck. This player was a little rusty, and I think that their deck may not have been optimally built, and so they were a little mana screwed in terms of color, and in the first game, I just ran them over because of that. In the second game, I think my opponent had some suboptimal plays, and I took advantage of that and kind of ran them over. You know, I'm not trying to like crush my opponents who don't have as much experience, but I'm also trying to play relatively optimally. And what I do for my opponents in these sorts of instances is that I tell them what I'm doing and why I'm doing it after I do it, so they understand the strategy behind what I'm doing, even if it is to my disadvantage in the long term. Because, you know, when you're playing at a pre-release, it's casual gaming, and there's a lot of people you don't want to turn away from the game. So I try to help them improve their strategy as well, so that they can get better and feel like they are having a good time. In the third match, I was up against a Jund player. This was a hard one for me because my opponent got to play some really big cards, and it made it kind of difficult for me to get through. And so once they played their big life gain worm, I just didn't have a chance of punching through that anywhere in my deck before they would be able to kill me. And so I lost the first game, and then in the second game, my opponent got mana screwed. And so I won that one, you know, because I'm a faster, lighter deck, and if my opponent stalls, I'm able to take advantage of it. In the final game, I just started with a flood and kept flooding, and there was really not much more to that. My opponent got cards to play, and his life went way over starting life, whereas mine went down to 0 and I died. And that was the end of that, putting me at 1 and 2 for total matches. Going into my last match, I was out of the running for prizes, but I still wanted some glory. So I played against a red-green deck, and in the first match, I think I took some incremental advantages, applied some careful removal, and I think Olivia's attendants are the ones that really took the game away from me. And I managed to turn it around at the very end with a powered up Olivia's attendants. In the second match, it was, again, a fairly close match, but at the end, gaining a pile of life off of a kindly ancestor and having ways to cut through my opponent put me at a higher life advantage, and that was just something my opponent wouldn't be able to overcome with the creatures that they had, and the fact that I could probably put a distracting Geist on one of my creatures and turn things around again. And so I won the final game and won the final match in straight sets, although those were both really close matches and really enjoyable as a result. Going 2 and 2 at the very end, and that netted me a participation pack for all of my efforts, which is fine. I paid for the sealed deck experience, and so I got 6 packs. The 7th pack is also fun as well. And overall, I would like to say that the sealed deck experience for Crimson Vow is actually pretty fun. There are a lot of bombs in this set, and so it does kind of matter what you open, because it can really feel bad if you don't open the right set of really good cards, but you do open more of them. And so prioritizing removal, I think, is really, really important in sealed for this set. And so I would definitely look for decks that have that over just straight synergy, which is, you know, it's harder to come by in sealed anyways. The actual pre-release event was, as usual for Magic in the last, I don't know, 8 years or so, not especially exciting. There wasn't really much to it aside from playing games, but that's still fun enough as it is. I do wish that there was just a little bit more care and attention provided to the experience, at least in the game box. I like that they still have the counters and everything like that, but adding tokens, like at least a set of tokens for all the commons and maybe the uncommons that are generated, that would be helpful, because it's just nice to not look at a die and be like, what was that again? And wonder if the thing that was being used to represent it is tapped or not. But those are all things that I would like to know the state of when it comes to tokens. But for a pre-release in the last, 8 so years, this was fine. It was fine. It was not an amazing experience, but I enjoyed the games and the gameplay. The set seems to be a pretty decent one when it comes to the sealed deck experience, and so that was my Crimson Vow experience. Let me know what your experience was with your pre-release in the comments below. If you went, did you have a good time? What did you open? What kind of deck did you end up playing? That's all stuff I'm curious about. Leave that in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.